Between saying I am Captain America and the after credits scene in this episode, Walker is really trying to become Iron Man, isn't he? Hello interwebs and welcome to my review of Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode 5, Truth. That's it. That's all there is to that name. There actually typically is more. They're like usually longer titles. I'll take a short title finally here. Is there no truth, beauty? I'm gonna stop with that joke. I don't know where I'm going with it. I'm just vamping because it's 1 a.m. As usual, I'm going to give my spoiler-free thoughts up front, and then we are going to delve into spoilers. So, spoiler-free, what did I think of this episode? Well, this episode was very much trying to pull back on the pace and kind of have like a slower episode before we got into the big finale, kind of setting up some pieces for the finale, as well as really giving us one last chance to delve into these characters before I assume the finale, which will probably be a lot more action-packed and faster-paced, as well as kind of digging a little bit more into the themes and ideas that the show has been wrestling with since episode 1. And generally, I think that would be a good idea, especially for the penultimate episode of a season. But in this episode, while there are some truly fantastic scenes and some really great discussions on theming and ideas, especially around the idea of what does it mean for a black man to become Captain America, and really kind of wrestling with the many implications of that. In other ways, this episode felt like it wasn't ultimately doing a lot and was kind of spinning its wheels trying to get to a full-length episode. There were scenes that felt oddly really long, really repetitive, scenes that didn't feel like they had a ton of point to them, and also, weirdly, a lot of scenes that felt very vague in what they were trying to say. The rest of the show has felt so directly targeted, with each scene feeling like it was trying to impart a very clear message and idea, and having so many layers of symbolism and tone throughout them that I've been very appreciative of. So to come into this episode, I felt a lot of these scenes kind of felt weirdly nebulous in a lot of what they were saying. Now, granted, there were some scenes that definitely were not that, but then there were other scenes that I'm just sort of like, okay, what was it? I'm not entirely sure what I was supposed to get out of that. And so ultimately I was kind of left like disappointed in this episode, with the sort of asterisk of it being, I liked some of the themes and ideas that it was bringing up, that it was discussing. And most notably, there are 2 scenes in this episode, one with Sam and Isaiah, who comes back in this episode, and another scene between Sam and Bucky that I deeply, deeply adored and thought were really, really fantastic. But outside of those 2 scenes, everything else kind of felt like slow, to the point of like me being like, get to the point. And it never really felt like it was as clear as it could have been. But those are my spoiler-free thoughts, so now it is time to delve into spoilers here. But before I get into my full-blown analysis of this episode, I should say right up front, because this episode is very much wrestling with the concept and theme of what does it mean for a black man to become Captain America, there are obviously going to be some things that I am, number one, going to probably miss, especially given that I am sort of watching this episode and giving my reaction to it right after seeing it at 1 a.m. in the morning. But also, I am not the only person that you should be listening to on this discussion. Well, again, I will do my best and want to have this discussion about, the ideas that this episode is bringing up surrounding the black community. I really think that anyone watching this show should go and listen to black voices on this episode. So I would highly encourage all of you, after watching my review, to also go and seek out those voices if you have not already, because I think that's very important for something like this. And I know that's something I am going to be doing tomorrow when I sort of sit down and do my regular listen and analysis to different podcasts that I typically listen to about this show. So I want to make that clear that I highly encourage everyone to not just listen to my own voice, though I am very glad that you are, but really go and seek out voices from members of the black community on this, and try and listen to multiple perspectives too, because the black community, as with every community, is not a monolith, and I'm sure many people in the black community will have many different opinions about this episode, but we'll certainly be able to provide a more fuller and richer context than I probably will be able to provide with this, though I am going to do my best, and I hope my perspective provides something interesting to this discussion, as I try to do always with everything. All right, the first scene of the episode is Walker on the run after having murdering one of the Flag Smashers who led to Lamar's death, and sort of him sort of wrestling with this and sort of having a PTSD moment after this, and then Sam and Bucky kind of fighting him for the shield. A few things about this scene that I really liked is I liked Walker constantly not taking ownership for his own actions. He constantly says, like, I should have listened, but then he starts becoming, during the fight, he starts saying, like, why are you making me do this? This isn't about me. I am Captain America. I had every right to do this. He constantly sort of aggrandizes himself, gives himself authority, and distances himself from any consequence to his actions and any sort of admittance of wrongdoing throughout his actions. It's sort of this entitlement idea that we've sort of been seeing building with Walker throughout the episode, and I deeply enjoyed that. I also really thought the fight scene was very well done, and I liked that Sam and Bucky were only able to defeat Walker, who has the super soldier serum, because they started working together in the fight. And the few moments where they actually were able to hold on to the shield is when they were sort of winning in the fight, like when Bucky sort of had the shield against Walker. I thought that was just some really excellent choreography matching the development of these characters throughout the series. I always love when choreography can sort of match character development, so wonderful job there. I will say I thought the symbolism of the shield in this episode was, or at least in this scene I should say, was a little bit heavy-handed, like Sam saying, give us the shield, and Walker saying, like, oh, so this is what that's about. It was very clearly like the writers of the episode kind of saying, like, isn't that shield very symbolically important of Captain America? And I could kind of feel the writer's hand in the episode that didn't really ring true to the characters and kind of just like about heightening the symbol of the shield to sort of set up for later stuff in the episode. So that was a little bit forced in my opinion, but generally I thought this was a good fight sequence to begin off the episode. Then we go back to the sort of displaced people's camp. Torres shows up. It was good to see Torres back. I was so sad that we didn't get much of him throughout the episode. We learned that Carly has sort of gone underground, hasn't been seen, and so there's nothing really for Sam or Bucky to do. I also liked that sort of Torres was looking at the Falcon wings and wondering how they got broken, and Sam says you can keep them, kind of hinting at what we know happens to that character in the comics, that he eventually becomes Falcon to Sam's Captain America. So that was really cool to sort of see that nod, and I'm excited to see if that is where that eventually is going to be going for his character. Then we get another fairly decent scene where we have Walker on trial at DC, where we learn that he is basically sort of stripped of all of his Captain America rank. He's been given a other than honorable discharge, which seems like a very unwieldy sort of thing to say, but obviously I'm sure that's a real thing in real life. And I did like this scene because, again, it goes back to Walker's entitlement. He says, I did what you told me. I did what you said. I am what you made me. I am Captain America. But I also liked that it was sort of an indictment on the United States, that like they were sort of passing them, saying like, oh, we don't approve of your actions. But a lot of the actions that Walker was taken were like things that the United States in real life has kind of done, sort of pointing the fingers like, you made me this, I am only what you made me to be, and now you're sort of disavowing me, when a lot of the things that I've done symbolically kind of mirror what US policy is, and this entitlement that we have every right to go into other countries and do whatever we want and have jurisdiction there, even though we probably shouldn't. So I like that sort of indictment, that sort of symbolic indictment, and that entitlement they came through with in Walker in this scene. I thought that was very targeted. One of the few scenes that really felt clearly targeted in this episode. Then we get a scene with Veep, of course, Veep coming in. She's playing the same character as Veep, and so I just like, with a darker edge, obviously, but she felt very much typecast, coming in as Valentina, clearly sort of alluding to, like, I am part of a secret organization that wants to use you because you have the super soldier serum. Very confident. Again, playing the same character as Veep. It was kind of fun to see her sort of reprising basically the same character there. Just sort of set up for next episode that Walker's clearly going to be handed off to some shadowy organization, maybe Hydra, who knows, but very interesting to see. Then we get Carly and crew in the camp, and sort of another setup scene where Carly's like, I'm very angry now. Obviously, the displaced people are sort of taken away and blamed for harboring her. I liked her line where she says, how long are we going to have to fight to be citizens of just this world? Sort of going back to her belief of being citizens of the world. I like that stuff, that little characterization of her and showing her radicalization in this scene. But ultimately, it's just, again, sort of set up for later on in the episode. Then we have a scene with Zemo at the Sokovia Memorial and Bucky catching up with him. This felt very intentional by Zemo. I don't know. It kind of was played off as like maybe he was caught there, but I feel like Zemo, this master schemer and planner, kind of knew that this is where Bucky was going to meet up with him. I would think it would kind of silly of him to be caught this way, so it feels like he might have an ace up his sleeve for next episode or potentially down the line in further movies. But there's a really nice scene between the two of them, between Bucky and Zemo, and Bucky sort of saying like, you need to kill Carly, that's what you need to do, and sort of, you know, Zemo sort of accepting his fate of being killed by Bucky, but Bucky choosing not to kill. That's not what he wants to do anymore, sort of showing that Zemo has the wrong idea about who Bucky is, and I like this that sort of scene to show that he's changed as a person, that he is not this inherent killer that Zemo saw him to be and talked about him being in previous episodes. So very nice there, and then he's sort of taken away back to the raft by the Wakandans. I'm kind of curious to see where that's going to go with Zemo. Will he show up in next episode and be dealt with then, or will he possibly appear in future movies? I hope that we have not seen the last of him, because Daniel Bruhl has just done a phenomenal job as Zemo, and I would be saddened if this is the last we see of him, but I doubt that it is. Then we get perhaps what is probably my favorite scene of the episode, where Sam goes and visits Isaiah. And Isaiah has, he basically relays the history, his history, kind of like making clear the implications that we had earlier on in, I think, episode 2 of the series, where he first showed up. Basically that he was actually a super soldier before Captain America, but obviously, as you know, there's been a long history of America doing this to black people, using black people to be experiment on drugs before they give it to a white person, and using the black community sort of as test beds grossly for experimental drugs and things like that. Again, we've seen that in real life. That has actually happened. And to hide the fact that he was a super soldier, Isaiah was put in jail and experimented and tested on before Captain America. So while Captain America Steve did not put directly Isaiah in jail, Isaiah's imprisonment was sort of precluded on getting to Steve and allowing Steve to sort of take the mantle of Captain America, and sort of his trauma, his pain, Isaiah's trauma and Isaiah's pain was erased in favor of giving that accreditation, that sort of as the first super soldier, the one who succeeded, the one who got to stand up for America, to a white man. And I liked that was sort of, they brought that very clearly to the fore. And I like Isaiah kind of saying, like, very clearly, like, why would any black man who has suffered so much for America, or at the hands of America, I shouldn't say for America, at the hands of America, both through racism, through being used and abused as a marginalized community, slavery as well, someone who has fought for this country and yet still has to face those things. Why would anyone in the black community want to be a symbolic representation of America and America's values to the world? I like that he sort of had that perspective, because that is honestly a very valid perspective. And we kind of saw that echoed with Sarah, Sam's sister, last episode, and sort of the brief scene between her and Carly. And so I like that he was just making that very clear and stating it very clearly, that the show is not shying away from the implications of what that would mean for a black man to take up the Captain America shield, and the very real conflicting ideas that go into that, and the complications that go into that, and Sam sort of wrestling with that, and sort of in the implication that Sam, that was why Sam didn't take up the shield, because he had those complicated feelings from that, and sort of listening to Isaiah on that. So I thought that was a really brilliant scene, and probably my favorite scene of the episode. Again, I will say there are probably things that I missed within that, and I would highly encourage you to go listen to other voices on that scene in particular. But for my money, I thought it was fairly well done. And then basically after that scene, outside of one particular moment, this episode starts to lose me, because it kind of just slows the entire pace of the episode to a crawl, and honestly gets a little bit dull for the moment, and a bit repetitive. Sam goes back home and sort of dealing with his selling the boat with his sister, and sort of that issue. And I like that Sam sort of wrestling with dealing with Isaiah, but then he sort of like has this idea of like, let's call on the community, let's see if the community can help. And I like that concept of like this idea of the community coming together to help fix their boat and calling in all those favors. That made sense to me. It kind of mirrors in a way what Carly's saying about one community, one world, and Sam Sam sort of not being this island upon himself, but looking towards the community around him, the black community around him, I think was just sort of a nice sort of echo of that. So that was nice, I will say. Bucky also shows up and starts helping them sort of build the boat. Again, nice. But then we sort of get a lot of scenes of that. In fact, there's like 2 whole sequences of like them working together, them bonding over building this boat. There's like that sequence, and then, you know, Bucky stays the night and then wakes up, and then they build the boat again. I get the point is like they're bonding over the building of the boat, but it was just like, all right, it was like 10 minutes of that. And I was like, okay, I got it. They're bonding. They're broing out over the boat thing. I got it. But it's okay. They were winterizing the boat. Get it? Because he's the Winter Soldier. He's working on the boat. Winterizing the boat. We'll move on. We'll move on. We also get a brief scene of Carter sort of calling somebody on the phone and saying like, hey, I got a job for you. You know, I have something for you. I'll pay you extra this time. Clearly alluding to the fact that Carter is going to have some play in the final episode and possibly hinting that she's the power broker. I will place my bets, my final bets that she's the power broker here. It would be too out of left field. It was just someone random at this point. So she's clearly the power broker in my opinion. And this scene was just sort of set up for that. Because that's really all she's in this episode for. It's just sort of being like, all right, yeah, she's probably the power broker, and we'll have some play in the finale. Then we get probably my second favorite scene of the episode, which is between Sam and Bucky sort of playing with the shield, playing catch with the shield. You know, 2 guys playing catch, as they do. And Bucky sort of apologizes to Sam, saying, we didn't realize what it would mean to give you the shield, a black man, the shield, and what that would mean to a black man. Again, I like that the show's just calling that out and saying it as it is and not sort of hiding behind metaphor, but like clearly saying like, no, it would be complicated for a black man to take up the shield of Captain America, and just stating that clearly. You know, I really thought that was great. Great scene between the 2 of them on that front. And I like Sam calling Bucky out. It's like, you cannot go around trying to do things for yourself. If you really want to sort of wrestle with your demons, you need to be of service. You need to help others. And sort of Bucky taking that to heart. I thought that was excellent, and saying that, you know, neither of us is contingent upon Steve, but that we got to grow beyond Steve. So I thought that was nice. Also, they keep saying like Steve is gone. It's like, is Steve dead? Clearly he wasn't dead at the end of Avengers Endgame. He was an old man. But did he say like, maybe I won't, and then die immediately on that bench? Because I figured Steve's still around. I'm still holding out hope he'll be appearing in a little cameo in the season finale next week. But yeah, they keep talking about him as if he's dead, which has me a bit confused. But I did like that scene. Clearly they're setting up for Bucky probably in the finale, probably his last scene or one of his last scenes of the episode, going back to help that gentleman get closure from the very first episode of the season with the guy's son that he killed as the Winter Soldier. I forget the gentleman's name, but clearly they're sort of setting that up as sort of the resolution of Bucky's arc, that he's going to give closure to that man by admitting that he killed his son. So I'm clearly think that that's where they're going with that. Then we get another scene between Sarah and Sam where Sarah says she's doesn't want to sell the boat, and Sam says, you know, I always wanted to try and do something in this world, but I always felt that you thought I was running away. That did feel like there was some thematic weight to that scene. I liked this idea that Sam sort of like felt like he wanted to go and do something in the world, but it felt like he was running away from his community, and his sister was saying like, I never saw it that way, but it was just, I missed you, and I'm glad to have you back here. But the scene to me, and maybe this is just me, it felt very vague. And it felt like it wasn't really saying, it was trying to like symbolically say a lot without really saying much and resolving much. Like, I haven't really felt like the 2 actors, both Sarah and Sam, have great chemistry together, but I haven't really felt like a sense of concreteness to their relationship and their issues with each other throughout the series. It's kind of just like been a couple one-off scenes here and there since the premiere episode. And so this scene honestly just felt kind of vaguely written and vaguely stated. And I didn't really have much connection to it because I haven't really had anything concrete to really sink into about their issues with each other in that scene. So it just felt like symbolically kind of nice and thematically kind of nice, but really didn't feel like a true character moment. It just kind of felt like vague character beats. And ultimately I was just kind of like, all right, it was fine. And that's sort of one of my major issues with that scene. wasn't rooted in anything concrete, and so ultimately felt superfluous, in my opinion. Then we get a training montage as Sam becomes Captain America, learning how to use the shield. It was nice. It was slightly overlong. I did like. I mean, this was so subtle, but Sam sort of running around, and his nephew sort of running around saying Uncle Sam, because Uncle Sam, because that's symbolic of America. Uncle Sam is a symbol of America. You get it. I see what you did there, episode. I see what you did there. Also, one scene that I missed is Walker went to visit the family of Lamar. It was nice to see Walker, see the trauma of Lamar's family, and maybe that spurs him on to want to do something more. But it felt a little bit weird to me that we went from a scene with Isaiah talking about the trauma of what it means to be Captain America, as a black man, and then we go to a scene where we see a black family traumatized, and maybe that was sort of the point that the episode was getting across. Now that I'm thinking about it, that it was sort of we're seeing black trauma, and this Lamar sort of dying for this white guy, and he only ever got to be the partner of this white guy. So in that sense, I kind of liked it. Sort of thinking about it, it's yeah, I guess I do like that juxtaposition. The scene didn't ultimately feel like it had much to say, but kind of juxtaposing it against the scene with Isaiah, I think that sort of has strength on its own footing. So I guess, yeah, thinking about it, I like that scene better now that I think on it. And now we're starting to get into the end of the episode, which is setting us up for the big explosive finale, presumably. Carly shows up in New York City. She is working with the bad guy from episode 1. And I liked this, by the way. I liked that Carly was working with a criminal and that her friends were sort of we're working with criminals now. This is the type of descent into sort of morally gray area that I like for this character. Instead of blowing up a base in an act of violence that didn't really feel motivated by her character, a slow slide into being oh, now you're working with morally gray people because you have sort of aligned goals. That felt true to me. That felt like something that would happen if you really want to show her morally grayness. So I like that she's working with this criminal. I thought that was a sort of good slide into the morally gray. I wish that was something that they had done a little bit more subtly earlier on in the season. But here I thought that was sort of a nice sort of way to show that she slipped into a morally gray area. It was also interesting to see that there's apparently a lot of people in New York City who will follow her cause, that this is a very worldwide thing. It's not just a sort of European thing or a thing that's going on with just displaced groups, that there are people within New York City who are willing to support her cause. I thought that was really great because that also rings true, that this sort of borderless world idea after the blip is not something that just rings true in certain areas but around the world. So kind of nice there. Then we sort of get that she's going after this sort of, vote that's going on about displaced people. This is another thing that felt very vague to me. I'm not entirely sure what the stakes are with this. That there's this vote going on and that she's going to be attacking it, but I'm not entirely sure what the vote is. Are they're voting to reintegrate the world? I can kind of have a vague idea of it, they're trying to reintegrate the world, trying to determine what to do with displaced people and force them to be moved and things like that. But the show never, maybe I missed it, but the show never kind of clearly called out exactly what this meant in a sort of very concrete way. And so I know there's been sort of call outs of it in previous episodes, some news reports and things, but I just wish the show had sort of set the stakes for what this vote meant a little bit more clearly, because it kind of just came out of nowhere for me. And I was oh, okay, I guess they're doing a thing in New York City voting on something about the world. Sure. It just felt very vague and the stakes felt very vague. But I get that Carly's going to attack this vote. I just wish I knew what was very concretely being voted on. And maybe I missed it, so feel free to let me know in the comments if I just completely missed something. And then Sam sort of has something from the box. I'm presuming it's a new Captain America type uniform from Wakanda. I like that idea that Wakanda is the one that supplies the new uniform for Sam. I think that's sort of nice symbolically, sort of a African country gets to provide the new uniform for Captain America, who is going to be a black man. Think that's a really cool idea. So cool, and I'm excited to see what the costume is going to look like next episode. And maybe it's not the costume, but I think that's where they're headed with that. And then we get the after credits sequence where Walker is building a new Captain America shield, clearly becoming the new sort of USA agent that we all knew he was going to be from the start of the series. So sort of interesting to see that after credits sequence, and clearly he'll be sort of a complicating factor in the finale. So ultimately, like I said, I think there are a few scenes that I genuinely enjoyed in this episode, namely the scene with Isaiah and the scene between Sam and Bucky. But overall, the episode felt a little bit overly slow-paced, a little bit overlong, and some scenes that felt very vague and not concrete in what they were trying to say, or sort of built off of anything concrete within the characters, specifically like between Sam and his sister, or between Carly, or the vote that was going on. So ultimately, kind of a mixed bag that had some strong moments, but ultimately was sort of like a blah episode. But I think the finale has the potential to sort of pull it all together. So I am excited for the finale. I think that I really appreciated that this episode was sort of wrestling with very difficult themes and ideas that I think, at least on those levels, it pulled it off well, if not necessarily the entirety of the episode. But again, I encourage you to go seek out voices from the Black community on that, because I'm not the only voice that you should be listening to. But other than that, I'd love to hear all of your thoughts down in the comments below. So let me know, what did you think of this episode? I'd love to hear all of it. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for my review of the finale next week and more stuff on this channel. I also have a Patreon page where you can support me. But beyond all of that, I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper. Here we go. So I'm finally here, performing for you. If you know the words, you can join in too. Put your hands together if you want to clap, as I thank you all with this patron rap. Catherine Lambeth, Miranda Janelle, Ashley Allen, Bo Kikio, Eli Bergmash, Aslan Solstice, John Cool, Greg Gillum, Stephen Kleinard, Randy Thompson, Felicia Toast, Wellington Marcus, Boyd Earl and Mary Beth Earl, Stephen Schuhart, Wayne Twitchell, Corey Honkinen, and Vale Dunn, A Man Chooses, A Slave Obeys, Ish the Mad, Dominic Noble, Buttoneer, John Steele, What Does God Need with a Starship? Michael Beam, Meadow Whisperer, William Steele, Chamomile Tea, BBD, Munir Amlani, Jason Knott, John Weatherby, Maeve Liama, Bree Beecher, Andrew K, Nathan Steele, Sky Skinner, Sean Piper, Flynn, Wen Dizzle Bizzle, Tiffany Danger, Cass the Lass, Laura Dermero, Geek Filter, Mari Neckar, Troy Stull, Gretchen Badger, Pissed and Twisted Garage, Bush, Jane Packard, James Krivda, Din, W, Randy E.D., Ellie O'Dare, John H. McDougal, Celestial John, Jacob Tovar, Sarah Bystam, Jessica Chapman, Lysa, Nikki Gordon Bloomfield, Polly Mina, Andrew Lamoureux, Jennifer Fuss, Zone 1 Librarian, Jenny Mabel, and Michael Hardy. Thank you so much. I hope you appreciate me being a dorky weirdo that's totally off key with any sort of beat, but thank you so much, patrons. I love you all.